BattleBoids is a geometry node system for creating massive procedural aerial battles inside of Blender. Whether you're making fan films, historical aerial battles, cinematic backgrounds, or abstract swarms, BattleBoids lets hundreds or even thousands of ships fly naturally using flocking behavior inspired by the Boid algorithm. Uses range from tiny nimble planes or starfighters to massive scale capital ships. In this tutorial, we're going to recreate the Battle of Coruscant from Star Wars using the add-on from start to finish. I intentionally designed this scene without any Star Wars ships in the background so we can build the battle together from scratch, while also learning every major feature of the system. Okay, before we jump into the fun stuff, let's get the boring part out of the way. BattleBoids is a paid Blender add-on available on GUMROAD for $10. This gives you a lifetime access, and since this is my first product, I'll continue to improve it over time. Every future update will be completely free if you've already purchased it, and all the tutorials will always be free on this channel. And here's everything that's included. The master Blender file, which contains the geometry nodes system, an optional vertex attribute add-on used for advanced bullet controls, a symbol license. All it is no redistribution or reselling these files, and if you use BattleBoids in your own projects, I'd really appreciate some credit. A demo file, where you can immediately start experimenting with the Boid forces we'll be covering throughout this tutorial, and finally a goodie bag with some extra assets to help you get started and have a little fun. If you're interested in purchasing this GeoNode tool, the link is in the description. Alright, now that the paperwork is out of the way, let's actually start making some space battles. So before you get started, I first suggest making a template scene, just like mine, and this will be your foreground. That'll be the focus of your shot, and moving this all into a collection so we can manage this scene better. We can call it main scene, for example. Once you're happy with your scene, we can now import everything we need for the BattleBoids geometry. You can also just go ahead and hide your foreground once you're happy with it. We're first going to need a special add-on that helps set vertex attributes, which will allow us to control bullets later on. We're going to go to Edit, and Preferences. You're going to go to Add-ons. You're going to go to Install Add-ons from Disk. Then you're going to go to your BattleBoids product. In there you'll see a BB Canon Vertex Tool.py. You're going to select that and then press Import from Disk. And then it's installed and ready to go. When you press N, it should show up at the bottom of the side panel. It's not really going to do anything yet, but it'll be important later. Alright, now for the actual BattleBoids geometry. We're actually going to need to import a collection this time. That's why I told you to close the main collection. So we're going to go to File, Append, and then we're going to go down to your product, select the master file.blend, and double click on it. Go to Collection, and then BattleBoids Collection. Then you can press Append. When you import BattleBoids Collection, you will see it contains a bunch of collections. You can hide these panels, they are explosion samples for that specific feature. The driver of the system is the BattleBoids geometry, which reads data from these collections. And all the settings can be found in the Modifier tab. This geometry is what is going to be rendered in your scene. Okay. Step 1 is to set up your instances. In other words, the objects that BattleBoids will use to create your massive battle. Obviously for the Battle of Coruscant, we're going to go with the Separatist Munificent Frigate, we got the Recusant, and the Venator, and then the Light Cruiser. Even though they are instances, I do recommend keeping them low poly for performance, especially for big scenes. But if you're doing like a scene where you're flying through them, you can keep them higher. For this to work, you're going to have to orient them in a specific direction. Your object's top or up direction should be the same as the world's positive x-axis. Your object's right side should be pointing towards the world y positive axis. And then the object's forward axis has to be pointing along the positive z-axis. Make sure the object is centered at the origin. Whenever you use BattleBoids, you have to make sure that every single instance that you use is facing this exact same orientation. The last thing we have to do for this is you're going to have to separate them into their corresponding teams. So we're going to put the Republic ships into Team A. It's the Team A container. And then we put the Separatist ships into Team B. These two containers will hold each team. For step 2, we're going to be adding our spawn domain for each team. The spawn domain is simply just a geometry in which all of your instances will spawn inside that geometry's volume. A good tip is to go to your original scene that you made in the beginning and watch it through just to kind of determine where the camera is going to be looking. You're going to kind of want to make an object that covers that entire field of view for the camera. We can go ahead and select maybe any mesh we want. I think the best for these kinds of battles is a cylinder, and we're just going to kind of move it the way we want. Okay, once we've found a happy place for our domain, we're going to take that domain, rename it to the specific team that's going to be spawning it. We're going to Team A first. We're going to put it into Team A spawn. Now Team B is going to need a separate one, so you can just Control-C, Control-V. Rename that and move it into Team B spawn. Also, before we forget, make sure to select the Don't Render button on all the instances that we're putting out that we don't need. You can enable the render toggle by selecting the drop-down menu in the top right here and just pressing that camera-looking icon. The BattleBoids geometry should be the only thing that's really showing up in the render, so later on you can just turn off all of the other ones. Let's start to spawn some instances. You should already have your domains ready to go. Click on the BattleBoids geometry to start filling in the data. Open the Team A Spawn tab and add the instance collection to Team A and the domains to Team A Spawn. Once you select the proper containers, you should see some instances popping up inside your domain. We can have some control over how the objects are spawned in. Open the Spawn Density Control tab. Click the See Density button to see the point map appear. This is only for visual purposes and not meant to be rendered. It will fill your domain with points, and the GeoNode system will select random points for spawn. Make sure the point spacing for each team is not too low because it will cluster too many points and decrease your computer's performance. The voxel amount can also be increased to conform to the volume better if you need that. Now, a really cool feature about this is that if you go to top view maybe, and then Control D to make a new domain, your boids will actually spawn inside these two domains evenly. Once you're happy with the amount of points that are in the domain, you can press See Density again and it'll just turn it off. You can see as we move these around, it acts as a random seed. The boids will spawn randomly again each time it's moved or rotated, so just keep that in mind. Inside Team A spawn, we have the Team A count, which obviously if you increase you'll get more and more boids spawning on the points. Again, if you see that moving around, it acts as a random seed, and you can also adjust the position of each spawn domain the way you want it. And once you press play, you're going to see that they might start moving. Let's go back to our controls for the spawn. We can again increase or decrease the count. You can also increase or decrease the scale. And keep moving it around the way we need it. And you can see that everything here is perfectly flat. It's because we have a Z limit. If we increase that, then the boids are free to spawn in any orientation they want to. But since these are capital ships, I kind of want to limit the Z so they all look like they're spawning level. Limiting the X and Y will do the same thing as the Z except in each direction. Occasionally we actually don't want random rotation. We can turn that toggle off. We can have all the boids facing one direction. They're going to follow the same rotation as your domain object. Now if we go again and make another copy of it, we can scale it up or down, move it around. A cool feature is the ability to control the starting orientation of the boids with multiple domains. Make sure that random rotation is turned off for this. Move and rotate it around, and you'll see that the instances will copy the orientation of each domain. You can do this with any number of domains and get very complex scenes. When you start the simulation, they will move from that orientation. There is also a maintain positive Z button. All it does is make sure that your boid's rotation keeps them as level as possible. When you want starfighter scenes, you can turn this off for more chaos, but for big capital ships I'm going to leave it on. Now we already have Team A, so all the Republic ships are moving around, but we're still missing Team B. It's going to be the exact same spawn process, but make sure you're selecting all the Team B collections instead of the Team A ones. Our next thing is the Boid battle controls. Here you determine the dynamics of your battle and how it looks. There are basically infinite combinations that result in different battle outcomes, but we're going to go over each setting and what it does. The first thing we're going to touch is speed controls. If you hit play, you're going to notice that all the boids are moving erratically and maybe a little too fast. If you open the panel, we have three controls: damping, speed, and speed random. Increasing the damping will make sure the boids have less jitter and their movements are much smoother. Obviously the speed controls how fast each one is moving, and speed random simply takes the original boid speed and adds or subtracts by that factor of the speed. Setting the randomness all the way to 1 means that boid speeds will range from not moving at all the way to moving double the original speed. Setting the speed random to 0 just means that every single boid is going to have the same speed. There will be no randomness in between them. For capital ships, since they're really big objects in real life, the speed should be really low and there should be really high damping. This will make sure that the movement of the massive ships is sluggish and slow, and will give a more realistic effect. Now that we're finished, let's go into the Boid force controls. This is going to determine the behavior of the entire battle scene. In the Boid force controls, you see we have a bunch of little sliders with alignment, separation, cohesion, evade, and attack. I'm going to go one by one to explain what each one does. Every force has both a range and strength slider. We're going to start with alignment to explain how things are working here. Every boid has its own local velocity vector that determines where it's going. Surrounding boids will change the direction of the local boid velocity, depending on what force type is acting. The range slider controls how far away other boids affect the current boid. We can imagine this by drawing a big circle around the boid that we're looking at. The range controls the radius of the detection circle. The strength slider controls how strong the force acts upon each boid. The first force is alignment. It takes the average friendly velocities of all detected friendlies, or boids on the same team, and creates an average direction vector. Increasing the strength of this will result in boid groups moving in the same direction. The next force is separation. This prevents friendly boid collisions by looking at surrounding velocities inside a specified range and moving the current boid away from its nearby neighbors. Playing with the range will give you different results. Keep a low range so that boids can appear as if in a tight formation, or high range for more isolated boids. The separation strength can make boid separation more strict or relaxed. Next is cohesion. Cohesion works by taking all the detected surrounding boid positions and moving the current boid velocity towards the center of all detected neighbors. It sort of acts just like a magnet to form squadrons or convoys. Combined with alignment, can create really large formations. The strength slider controls the strength of the magnet, and the range controls how many neighbor positions are being considered. Keeping a low range for cohesion is good for keeping small squadrons, but keeping a high range may make them all gravitate towards the center. Evade is the exact same concept as separation, just for enemy boids. It will try to avoid enemies that get too close, and evade only works with a 360-degree detection circle around each boid. Keeping it low will make sure that each boid has enough force to point and attack at enemies. Attack works just like cohesion, and gravitates to the average position of enemy boids and will point at the nearest one. A low range will make boids attack when they are very close to enemies, but a high range will make boids fly towards objectives or average enemy groups. All these sliders are of course keyframeable. You could for example start with a high attack range, and once the boids meet, decrease for a short range to keep the dogfights 1-to-1. Now there's a lot of different combinations of these parameters. You can also turn forces off. If you slide the strength slider on any of these force types to 0, it basically just turns out that force. Maybe you don't want the evade force working, and you just want to have attack and all the other ones. Play around with these combinations to see which result gives you the best looking battle that you want. Field of view, or FOV controls, determine what each boid is able to see. Instead of searching in every direction, you can limit visibility to a specific angle in front of the boid, giving you much more finer control over the behavior of the battle. There are 3 FOV controls: friendly FOV, attack FOV, and firing FOV. The way they work is simple. Imagine drawing a full circle around the boid. As you increase the slider towards 1, the visible area expands until the boid can see in all directions. As you decrease the slider, the visible area becomes smaller, limiting the boid's vision to an arc directly in front of it. At a value of 0, the boid has a 180-degree forward field of view. Any neighbors outside of this visible arc are ignored and will not be included in the boid force calculations we covered earlier. Friendly FOV controls how the boid detects and reacts to nearby friendly boids. Attack FOV works the same way, but it only affects how enemy boids are detected. Fire FOV controls when a boid is allowed to fire. We don't want a boid shooting at a target that's 80 degrees off to the side. Instead, this setting limits firing so the target must be within a much narrower angle directly in front of the boid before it can shoot. Our last dynamic controls are axis movements. For capital ships, for example, maybe you want them moving level and not moving vertically up and down. You can limit the movement in one axis. If we turn down Z a bit, we can see that the boids prefer to level out flat. Changing the X and Y has the same effect on those directions. Our next task is setting up the cannons. This is what the BattleBoid Cannon Vertex add-on was for, that we installed in the beginning of this tutorial. Cannons are vertex points where bullets will be shooting from each instance. Every instance can have its own cannon setup, and we're going to walk through a few examples of setting it up. I've turned on the key scanner so you don't miss any clicks here. First, go ahead and hide everything except the Team A and B instances. We need to get the cannon points from the reference geometry. Remember, this process is going to go for every single instance you'll ever use for this add-on. Press Tab to go into edit mode and start selecting vertices where bullets will be coming out of. These will be your cannon points. For capital ships, you're probably going to be selecting a lot more than just a couple. If you're dealing with a starfighter, you'll most likely only be selecting a few. But you don't have to overthink this too much. In the chaos of a big battle, nobody's really going to notice in the background that some ship is shooting from the wrong point. So whatever makes you happy and how accurate you want to get is totally up to you. Once you have your points selected, press G to move them around to make sure that you're happy with them. With your points selected, you can press Shift D to copy them, press Escape to let them go, and then you're going to press P and then Selection. If you hide your original mesh, you should see only the points that you've left over after the actual name of your ship so they stay in the same order. When you've renamed your cannons, you're going to move them into the Team A cannons container. The collections are sorted alphabetically. Whatever cannons you put into the Team A cannons, The first cannon object will correspond to the first object in Team A, so make sure those are ordered correctly. I'll leave the process of the second one with no commentary and at 2 times speed if you need to watch that again. When you've selected the Team A cannons, check again and make sure that the order is the same as you expected. For example, here the light cruiser cannon should be first, and then the Venator cannon should be last, in both containers. We now need to set the vertex attributes so that we can control the cannon settings like frequency and alternating fire. There is a way to do this in vanilla Blender, but it's too complicated and harder to keep track of. With the cannon points selected for one particular object, select N and open the BB Vert Set tool. You'll see that it says enter edit mode to use. Right now we're still in object mode. Press tab to go into edit mode and select all by pressing A. You see that none of them are actually set. There's an X by each of the parameters here. And we're going to have to manually set them like this. For the cannon count, set the exact number of cannon points that you have. The fire offset will control how many frames go by between each fire. And alternate is a boolean, just means that either they fire all at once or they fire individually, which you can turn on and off. When you've set the desired cannon vertex attributes, click Apply to selected vertices, and the settings will be saved on this object. Do the same process for each reference geometry that's in your BattleBoids container. If you need to check again or make changes, make sure to press Read from Active Vertex, and it'll fill the top values with the values that you set on those points previously. Once you're done with the Team A instances, you can do the exact same process for Team B, but make sure that the cannon objects go to the Team B cannon container. It may be confusing when you mix them up, so double check, make sure it's right. Before we go on to adding our actual bullets, I want to show you one thing that comes with the BattleBoids product. You can find it if you go to File, Append, you're going to go to Goodie Bag, and then you're going to click on Laser Bolt. If you go to Objects, you can click on Laser Bolt and press Append. Move that into the Team A or B bullets, and this is a free laser bolt which you can change the color of to whatever you want. This is going to be our sprite or instance for the bullets that will be coming out of the capital ships. I've duplicated this laser twice and put one into Team A bullets and one into Team B bullets. In order to change the color, just open that shader editor and click on the color ramp color, and then you just select whatever laser color you need. Team A bullets will be blue because the Republics are blue, and then Team B is red because they're Separatists. When you're scaling it, make sure it's scaled to how it would look like coming out of your object. Place this laser, just like the capital ship references that we have, onto the world origin. If you're making your own custom bullet, make sure that the origin is at the bottom of the laser, because when it spawns, it may spawn kind of in the middle, but you want the origin to be at the end of the laser and on the world origin. When you have your lasers set up, open your BattleBoids modifier and scroll down to bullets A and B. You can check them to turn them on. And then for each collection slot, you have to fill in the collection that contains the team's bullets. So for Team A, select the Team A cannons first, and then the Team A bullets. And for Team B, just do the same thing, but for the Team B collections. Now hitting play should make the bullets start to show up. They should be following your cannon attributes that you set earlier. If they're not firing yet, you can open the bullets shared, which we're about to go over. You can increase the range just to test it out. If your bullets are spraying in this weird way, like you see there, there's just this weird, like thousands of bullets coming out at the same time. I probably made a mistake during the cannon attributes setting part. So if there's a mistake there, just click on that object's cannons and then make sure the settings are correct. The problem here is that I did not click the set attributes button, which means that all the cannons will be firing at once every single frame by default. The Boid bullet settings are both controlled by the bullets shared panel. Here you control the Boid's general settings for both teams. First we have firing range, which is the range at which the Boids will start to shoot at each other. There is also a fire range random, which adds and subtracts a random value that is between 0 and the random number you select. This gives individual Boids random firing ranges, so they don't all fire at the same time, but you can set it to 0 if you do want them to fire at the same time. Bullet speed is how fast the bullets travel. They should always be faster than the Boid speed, otherwise the bullets will lag behind the Boid. Speed random adds randomness the same way it did for Boid speed randomness. Keep it low, but it adds more randomness to the firing patterns. Spray factor controls how accurate the bullets are. Cannons don't always fire in a straight line, so increasing this will encourage more realistic bullet spray. If you turn it too high though, bullets will travel in all directions and have no accuracy. Bullet scale controls the global scale of all the bullets. Bullet lifetime controls how long until the bullet disappears. We don't really need to render bullets to go far, far away. In real life, cannons always work in bursts. To prevent Boids from just firing all the time, we have the following settings. We have fire min and max. Fire min and fire max control how long the Boid bursts will be. The Boid burst will last a random number of frames defined within the min and max range. There's also a cooldown period min and max that makes the Boid cool down before the next burst. Every Boid will also have a random cooldown time between this range. We can also add simple obstacle shapes into our scene and control avoidance. To test it, add a cylinder or any primitive into the obstacle container. Move it around into an area maybe with a high Boid concentration. Open the obstacles panel and select the obstacle container. You can fill it with as many obstacles as needed. For obstacles, there are 3 simple settings: obstacle strength, voxel size, and bandwidth. You have to play with the obstacle strength to get a value that looks realistic with your Boid dynamics. Too strong and the Boids will turn violently, and too soft and they might pass through. Voxel size controls how conformed to the shape the forces are. If you make it smaller, it may slow down performance. In order to explain bandwidth, here's a simple example. Around the cylinder, if we have a bandwidth of 10, the forces will start acting all the way out here. But if we have a bandwidth of 1, the forces will start acting much closer to the actual object surface. 1 is the minimum value you can have. Note that the forces from the obstacles will only work along the edges of the obstacle, and if a Boid is inside, it will not be affected by anything. It'll just kind of keep moving until it gets to the edge. Another thing to note is preserving performance. I'm jumping ahead here with a second BattleBoids object that is controlling starfighters. We have a cinematic scene where a venator is passing through the battle, but it has extremely heavy geometry, and it's going to tank our performance when using it as an obstacle. Instead, parent a primitive shape to it and use that as the obstacle. Once the object is parented, make sure to deselect it so it doesn't show up in the render. The final result is perfectly realistic, and we don't have to tank our performance just for some accuracy. You may also want to add border objects to prevent Boids from flying off into the distance and getting lost. Borders work the same way as obstacles. This time, just make a border object that surrounds the Boids that spawn. The socket in the border panel only expects an object, so don't put it into a container. You can put it at the bottom of the BattleBoids container. There can only be one border, but if you need 2 borders, you can just join the geometries as one object with Ctrl-J. The parameters work the exact same way as the obstacles, except it works inside the volume of the border. Play with the strength to match your scene dynamics, and bandwidth to affect the range of the border force. You may have noticed that the purple line that appears when you press play while the BattleBoids geometry is selected is actually baking the scene. Once it gets to the end, you can play back the scene faster. However, you also may notice quickly that whenever you make any changes, it quickly deletes the bake and everything is slowed down again. Unfortunately, there's no Blender setting to fix this. What you can do, if you need to have real-time playback, or save your scene, is to open the Geometry Nodes editor with the BattleBoids geometry selected, and navigate to the end of this mess right before you see the output node. Shift A to add a bake node and connect the very last green pipe to the input of the bake node and the output of that into the geometry output. Select animation and hit bake. Now your scene is moving in real time when the BattleBoids geometry is not selected. The reason you need to do this manually though is because Blender has not yet fixed a motion blur problem. If you render your scene, you'll see crazy motion blur streaks which the bake node completely ruins. My suggestion is this: when you're planning the scene and like the result, add the bake node to finalize and save the scene for easy playback and editing. Once you are done, remove the bake node and replace the green pipe where it was before. Do not edit any other nodes or you risk breaking the system. Once you are ready to render, go to the timeline and play back the whole scene until the solid purple line goes to the end, then it is safe to render with motion blur on. To wrap up this tutorial, the last thing we're going to do is the explosions. This is the cherry on top to any cinematic battle, especially Coruscant. Since BattleBoids is more of a background asset, the explosions will be animated 2D tiles instead of volumetric. This will keep your performance intact while also giving a great result. Now it's not just going to be a 2D tile, but each explosion will spawn a certain number of 2D tiles, and it's going to give a very convincing 3D effect from far away. There will be a future tutorial dedicated specifically to explosions and even how to make your own samples. As you can see, the scene is severely lacking some explosive action. Go down to the explosive panel and select the explosion container. Again, it already comes with 2 sample explosions. You can use these for your scenes. If you have any custom explosion flipbooks, they're going to go into this container. When you hit play, you're going to see these tiles spawning all over the place. BattleBoids is going to take every single explosion you have in that container and randomly select each one each time. Explosion range is the range at which explosions start to appear. The explosion is triggered when an enemy Boid is within this range. This range depends on how big your scene is. For this scene I've made them pretty big, so 100 is about the right number. You're going to have to tune it yourself, depending on your scene size. Resolution is how many tiles spawn for each explosion. The higher the resolution, the more realistic the 3D effect it gives. Keep it lower to save performance. Even a small number like 7 is still good and it works from far away. Min and max duration controls the timing of each explosion. Each explosion will last a random number between these values. The value selected should be close to the actual frame count for every explosion animation in your container. Stagger offsets the explosion tile animation so that not all tiles start their animation at the same time. With small poppers like this, the difference is very subtle. You can try to see it here on this one. A stagger of 1 will release the animation through the whole explosion, while a stagger of 0 will release the animation all at the same time. Min and max scale controls the range of scales of your explosions. You may want to have a scene where you have a bunch of big ones and a bunch of small ones. In this case, I definitely want some medium-sized explosions and some tiny ones. Min and max offset controls how often your explosions spawn. Keep the range very low for chaotic and constant explosions. Keep the range higher to get less occurrences. Spread speed controls how fast your tiles spread from spawn. Likely, 1 or 0 will be a good number to start with, but you can have more stylized explosions that scatter in all directions with a higher value. Random spawn offset will randomize the position of the explosions. By default, explosions spawn at the exact Boid position and looks like this. The random spawn offset will move the spawner randomly by a random number, up to the range that you provide. A medium range will give you clustered explosions around the Boid, and a high range will fill the domain with explosions everywhere. Now you may have noticed that there's some trails panels. I'm actually not going to cover them in this tutorial because they're a bit more involved, and they're more related to small starfighters or planes in the atmosphere. I'm also still trying to improve them in the meantime. but soon there's going to be a dedicated tutorial specifically made for trails. Thank you for checking out this tutorial. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to respond in the comments in a timely manner. If you're interested in purchasing this GeoNode tool, the link is in the description. Thanks and see you next time.